This is the Oddball Show, a podcasting collaboration between JP Line Productions and Oddball Magazine.
Welcome, all ye plebeians, plutonians, pirates, pilots, and participants. This is indeed the Oddball Show. Back with our first podcast here in this brilliant new year of 2018, Anno Domini. My name is Prof. I'll be your switchboard operator for this long-distance call, and I represent the Boston hip-hop garden known as JP Lime Productions. Of course, we couldn't have the Oddball Show without the OO himself, the founder and editor-in-chief of the living, breathing poetry organism that is Oddball Magazine. Please say hello to Mr. Jason Wright.
Hey, everybody. Happy 2018. It's we're really excited to be here. Prof, how you doing today?
Feeling great, man. Feeling ready for both a new year and a new spirit here in the Oddball Show.
Absolutely. I mean, I feel very hopeful for this new year. Definitely.
I mean, we are almost a full month into it, and we've already passed the anniversary of our President Shithole. But,
yeah, what a douche. Like,
but I see great things ahead.
And the Patriots are going to the Super Bowl for anyone who does appreciate a good Patriots game.
And we're 2 weeks away from another Patriots Super Bowl. That is the right way to kick off the year.
And the Celtics are doing great. I mean, it's really, and I'm doing great, you know.
And you're doing great.
And your baby's doing well, right?
Indeed, he is. He's fantastic.
And I have a PlayStation 4 now, so like life is pretty good.
Things are picking up, man.
Not bad.
We are privileged to be joined this evening by Thomas Brown, a peer specialist with Bay Cove Human Services, to talk us through some of the newest approaches and challenges in the mental health field, including the new ACCS model set to go into effect here in Massachusetts in the early part of the year. I've also heard rumor that he'll be gracing us with a performance of Bring the Ruckus on classical trumpet, so you'll certainly want to stay tuned for that. Ladies and gentlemen, and all the ships at sea, please give a warm Oddball Show welcome to Thomas Brown.
Hey, Prof. Hey, Jason.
Hey,
good to be here.
Good to have you on the show, man. Great.
Thomas, thanks very much for taking the time. We appreciate it.
You bet.
We have a lot to talk about here on the show. There's a lot going on here in the Massachusetts mental health industry, and it's something mental health is something that's very important to us here at the Oddball Show. It's certainly a issue close to both of our hearts, but especially Jason. It's what he does for a living. It's something. It's one of his chief causes. So I'm going to take a little bit of a backseat role tonight, but I do want to kick us off with just trying to ask, what is it that you do as a peer specialist? I know it's a pretty new role here in the mental health field, or at least in the last decade or so. Let's talk a little bit to kick off the show about what a peer specialist is, why it's important, why it's helpful. And what is it exactly that you do?
Okay, absolutely. So yes, it is a pretty new role in mental health. The profession is really in its infancy. We've had peer specialists in the United States. I think our first peer specialists were in Pennsylvania about 30 years ago. And in Massachusetts, it's a much newer profession. And in 2000, I believe it was 2009, DMH mandated that we have peer specialists in our mental health human service agencies. So that's not all that long ago. And a peer specialist is somebody who has a lived history of mental health challenges. First of all, there are all sorts of peer specialists. You can have peer specialists who are cancer survivors, peer specialists who are amputees, all sorts of peer specialists. And so we have mental health peer specialists. And the peer and peer specialist means that we are one of you, and you are one of us. So we're people who've been there. We've really struggled. I myself have struggled with the aftermath of really extreme physical and sexual violence for my first 2 decades of life, almost 2 decades. And then I spent decades more in recovery from that, and will always be in recovery from that. But I'm doing really well right now. And so those of us who have chosen to disclose our mental health challenge, the nature of it, some of the details of that, then reach out to other people who are struggling. and support them around that. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we're reaching out to people who are doing really badly to help them bring them to where we are. It's more that we're reaching out to connect and to humanize that person. People with mental health challenges are often some of the most highly discriminated against people in our culture. And there's a lot of fear, there's a lack of understanding. So these people are living often on the margins of civilization and culture. And what we help do is to reconnect people to humanity. And that's a pretty important task. None of us like to be separated from other people. And so we really work to bring people back in. And then there are times also when we work with people and we're supporting them to actually come along a little way. People who've given up hope in their lives, we can be the evidence that there is hope, there is meaningful recovery. And so we offer that hope and offer ourselves as evidence that a kind of meaningful life is possible despite the challenges we've lived with.
I mean, to me, it seems like that last piece that you mentioned is probably one of the most powerful, right? That just in building that relationship with whoever it is that you're working with, to be able to see somebody who has been able to recover and is in a position of being able to help someone else has to be a powerful
Absolutely.
example and a powerful tool.
It is an incredibly powerful tool. I have seen over and over and over again how people have either listened to me speak or listened to other peer specialists speak, and suddenly, for the first time in maybe decades or for the first time in their life, have hope. Because they see us living lives, they see us going to work, they see us involved in really complex aspects of our organizations that we work for, and doing really amazing things in the world. And I think often, unfortunately, there's this kind of stigmatization that happens with mental health that tells people often that they can't do those things. So people are struggling from inside, like, for instance, somebody has a lot of trauma, they're struggling with the pain, the suffering, the horror often of that. But then they're also struggling with what's coming at them outside. And so from both places, we've got this hopelessness, sense of hopelessness that comes in. And we can help with both of that. I think seeing us be successful in the world tells people that stigma isn't quite as powerful as they once thought it was. But you're absolutely right. That's a really powerful moment for most people.
Absolutely. And to chime in, as a peer specialist myself, there's a value of being, not only someone with lived experience, but also working with people who might find that they've been in the system for a long time, and or they feel like they have challenges of their own, and you kind of give a layer of hope to them. And I think one of the big powers of peer special, the peer specialist profession is giving that hope to people. That's what I've noticed with the work that I've been doing as a peer specialist myself.
Right. Absolutely.
Oh,
sorry. Just to
good.
Could you explain what the system is? Because a lot of people.
Oh, sure. Good question, Thomas. So the system I would say, and you can elaborate on this, would be the mental health care system, or maybe the judicial system, or maybe any kind of system that people are kind of put in. Society in itself is a system. And when you fall outside of that system, whether you have a mental health challenge or you have a CORI or whatever, sometimes you need support. Not everyone who has a mental health challenge is someone that there's people who are creative, brilliant people who struggle or live with mental health conditions such as depression or anxiety, or they hear something that isn't there, and we label them, or society labels them as someone who's an oddball, basically, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Nicely done.
And basically, us oddballs, or whoever, whatever they want to define themselves as, could very well be someone who is brilliant, ingenious, whatever. I work with someone who has issues dealing with extreme collecting, and I told him that it wasn't the extreme collecting that is his problem. It's all the things that surround him that make him what it makes him. I mean, there is no problem. There is no problem with what he goes through. It's all the things that he does that makes him who he is, and he says what is a problem, what around it is actually really wonderful things. The fact that he's creative, that he likes projects, these kind of things. You know, this is a really ingenious kind of person, but he's been labeled as something that he should be ashamed of. And I think one of the things a peer specialist does is to take away the shame of having a mental health challenge and also show the pride of having one. And I think that's kind of
absolutely,
you know.
Yeah, and I love what you're saying. Going back to systems. So systems have struggled to figure out how to help people with challenges. And at times, you know, they've been really heroic, and other times they just couldn't figure out, you know, how to help best. And so sometimes that not knowing how to help has translated into oppressing people. Because they feel like they were doing the best they could, and it still ended up being oppressive for a person. There might be judgment or discrimination. And what we do as peer specialists then is that we go into that gap of information and we bring the information that's needed to help the person. And so something like what you were talking about, somebody who collects a lot of things. So, you know, the DSM is going to label that as something that's a pathology. Whereas we look beyond that. We look at the life meaning, the context behind that. And we look at all the different meanings that are possible in that. And that's the kind of information that's often missing within traditional care. And I'm finding that organizations can be really grateful to have that information from us.
Thomas, can you talk a little bit about how being inside the system but not of the system is important as a peer specialist?
Right. Absolutely. So we're here to collaborate within our organizations, and but at the same time, we have different values, different principles. We've got a lot of shared values, a lot of shared principles, but we also have a different perspective because we've lived this, we've been through it. I know myself, I've lived through different parts of the system. And there were places where I needed things to be better because I went about over 2 decades not really getting the help that I needed until I was able to find out how to give that to myself. And then I was able to tell my providers what they needed to give me. So we're in the system, but we're not of the system, meaning that we aren't necessarily a part of that traditional system. We're a new profession with our own code of ethics. That again, there's a lot of overlap, say with clinical person's code of ethics, but there's a lot there that isn't there, and traditional mental health providers. So one thing that's really big is mutuality and practicing mutuality. This is absolutely the work of a lifetime. Mutuality, what that refers to is that we're on the same level on the playing field. Not one of us is in a higher position than the other person. And peer specialists really, really work to protect that. Because it's being on the same level where we start really connecting with the other person, where the other person feels safe, feels that we're safe, and feels like they can begin opening up to us and they can begin receiving support from us. And often in traditional psychotherapy or psychiatry, there's this kind of top-down, in the same way, kind of a bureaucratic management style. That's a little too harsh. I don't quite mean that therapy is bureaucratic, although it can be. But the therapist is sitting from a position of not having to disclose, of not having to really show their warts and their scars to the person. And the person is down there, you know, showing all their warts and their scars. And so some therapists are just amazing artists, and they do that really, really well. And they lower, you know, that level. They lower the play or even the playing field more, but it's too common in therapy that doesn't happen. And so what happens is the person goes away feeling that they're somehow less than the other person, who the therapist who has all this information is remote and, you know, is all together. And it's just not true. That doesn't reflect reality. No one is all together. No one has survived life. You know, if you've made it to birth, you've had some kind of trauma already. And so it creates kind of an artificial relationship. They're relating to somebody who's being a little artificial. And often the interpretation for the person being supported is that they're less than. So there are lots. Yeah, go ahead.
I absolutely agree with that statement. I love how you said warts and scars, which could be considered beauty marks. And I thought of that. But I definitely think what you said about the level playing field of a therapist versus someone seeking services, it's not there. You go into a therapist's office, and I know I have a great relationship, I guess, with my therapist, but I sit there and I talk and I say all my personal stuff. And I don't know anything about this person. Whereas in peer support, there's a level of mutuality there. There's a little bit of transparency. And I think in the clinical world, there's no transparency. I mean, is that the I've spoke with doctors who've made me feel a lot less than after leaving the office, and that's not help. That's not congruent to helping you.
Right, absolutely. Help is not helpful if it isn't helpful.
Exactly. So if therapy is actually making you feel worse, or a doctor makes you feel less than, or makes you feel kind of stupid, that doesn't make you at all. And also, it doesn't bring you towards that level of recovery that everyone's kind of searching for, you know?
Right, absolutely. And just want to be clear, this is not about trashing psychotherapy.
No.
It's about being a little critical of the system that's been going on for over 120 years, because there are some flaws in it, and it's really important to acknowledge them so that we can provide much better support for people.
Absolutely. And to go on that, I would say that a lot of the people who are in human services generally care about the people that they work with. I'm just saying that there is definitely some you know, there's not always a level playing field, and with the peer specialist role, it's much more a sense of mutuality with
absolutely
the person.
Absolutely. I think, you know, good therapy and more mutual therapy is completely possible, and if people are interested in seeing examples of that, go look at Dan Mackler on doing psychotherapy and trauma and healing, because he was a psychotherapist for 10 years. He's a filmmaker now. He wrote and directed a film on open dialogue in Finland. And he also wrote Take These Broken Wings, a beautiful film.
And what about William Hall? Wasn't he also was he some clinical person? I know he.
You know, I'm not familiar with him.
Oh, I'm very fond of William Hall. He's part of Mad in America, and he writes.
Oh, yes, right, of course, right, okay, and, absolutely, yeah.
He wrote a book, kind of like it's called like Outside This. I forgot what honestly, I should have came with this, but it was a book that I was at the Alternatives Conference, and there was a free download of it, and
fantastic.
I forgot the book. It was like Outside Voices or something like that, and it's about voices outside of the mental health system. So he also has a clinical role, or he did, or he's a therapist or something, but he does lend that pure voice. And I think people with lived experience sometimes make the best, sometimes they make the best therapists or something. Because
that's a really important point. So what we're seeing in the newer ethics books and social work and in licensed mental health counseling, we're seeing those ethics books encourage therapists to expose themselves a little more, to get a little more comfortable talking about some of the experiences they've had in life that can resonate with the people that they're supporting or they're giving therapy to. And what they acknowledge is that it is the peer support movement that has showed how important that can be, because there's research showing how powerful our help is and how much it helps, and how much living experience has helped. And this whole idea about not being a human being and not exposing that to the person you're supporting. It goes way back, and it goes back to the very beginning of psychiatry, when psychiatrists really wanted to be medical. They wanted to have recognition, they wanted to have status, and they thought that the way to do that was to look like medical doctors, and all of them were trained as medical doctors. And so it was the patient, and it was the helper, the healer, and the patient. And so this whole idea of being distanced from the person that you're working with, being the god of knowledge, that started, so long ago, before the end of the 19th century, and it's just been handed down. And somehow this idea that you can't be fully human with a person was reiterated over and over and over again. And one of the leading phrases that I hear is that you don't want to make the session about you want to make it about the person. And so that was used over, that's what we've heard for like the last 30, 40 years. Don't make it about you, it's about the person. If you talk about yourself, you're going to make it about yourself, and you'll ruin the therapy session. And that's really true. And like somebody who's like a real extreme narcissist, that could be dangerous in a therapy session. The person could go in and all they do is talk about themselves. That would be really sick therapy. But the truth is, I think that phrase, don't make it about yourself, really came out of fear. I think that often people who are doing psychotherapy, who are teaching psychotherapy, are afraid of being really vulnerable in front of the person, or maybe in front of lots of people. Because when we're vulnerable, we really have to step deeply into our humanness. And that kind of exposure often doesn't feel comfortable for people. And I'm not saying there's anything nefarious in that. I don't think that anybody's conscious of doing that. It is not something that people sit down and plan to do to other people. But I think that that's some of what's there, and why that adage is there, not making the session about you. And what peer work did, it came along and it said, wait a second, we're talking about ourselves. And instead of making it about us, it makes it possible for the person to heal and to be themselves and to reconnect with another human being. It makes connection possible.
Thomas, what you said about peer specialist support. Now, I've seen you. Luckily, first of all, my company allowed me to go to a recent conference where you were giving a lecture or a symposium or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
On trauma-informed care. Can you tell me how trauma-informed care can kind of be like a good tool of being a good peer specialist?
Oh goodness, yeah. So, well, first of all, just to correct something, not to correct something, but to address something. So I tend not to use the phrase trauma-informed care, because that word, I use trauma-informed support instead.
Oh, that's much better. Yeah.
Yeah, because that trauma, the care, that implies that, again, the healer and the sick one, and taking care of the person who can't take care of themselves, when we really want to encourage people to take care of themselves.
That's interesting, because it's funny to change it from care to support, because it actually changes the whole dynamic of
Absolutely.
Care to support, where you are not you're not, care is different from support. Can you just elaborate real quick on what's the difference between care and support?
Sure. Well, one thing that we do that unwittingly causes a lot of harm is that we have this often in all sorts of service vectors. We have this idea that caring for the person is the way to help the person. And then often in mental health, that becomes a kind of paternalization. We become parental toward the person. And when we do that, we really are, again, putting ourselves in a position over the person. And we mean well. We mean to help the person. We, sometimes we feel helpless, and helping the purpose is really living an extreme life experience. And so we take care of them. We take care of them. And superficially, that feels good for both parties. The person offering the care feels good about themselves. It's virtuous. They're doing what they feel is a really good service. And the person being taken care of, who is so afraid of what's happening inside of them or outside of them, it feels good to them also. For momentarily, it feels safe. But when you do that over and over and over, sometimes for decades, what happens then is the person who's taken care of learns that they are dependent on care. And that's not safe. It is not, I mean, for short periods of time to be dependent on care is important. And, you know, it's a skill that as humans we need to learn, because there are going to be times in our lives, either in old age or when we have a high spinal cord injury, where we're going to have to learn how to use being taken care of. Yes. But for the most part, we need to be taking care of ourselves. We need to be paying really closely to what our needs are, and then reacting to those needs and giving ourselves what we need. That's just life. And we take that away from people when we provide all the care.
So Thomas, would you say the difference is self-care and is there a difference between self-care and self-support?
You know what? I've never thought about that before. I don't think there is.
I guess because you should care and support yourself, right?
I think we're talking about care of ourselves. That's the use of the word that is really appropriate. We're taking care of ourselves. We always need to be taking care of ourselves.
Absolutely. So when you say coming at things with a trauma-informed attitude, or just being trauma-informed as a tool for, I guess it wouldn't be. It would be your self-care. To be knowledge of your own trauma, right? But more. Let's talk more about what it is for someone to be trauma informed.
Okay, trauma informed means to be historical in your relationship with another person. In other words, you create a meaningful connection with that person and you learn about them. You be really, really curious, just like you would with any other person that you care about in your life. Learn about them, what happened to them, how did it affect them, what did that lead to, how did it affect their lives now, you know, how they're living their lives. Or not able to live their lives. And you'd be really curious about that. And when you have that kind of information, your interactions with that person are really respectful, they're very supportive, and they're deeply meaningful. And that person understands that. You've got much lower levels of judgment, you've got much more accurate interpretations of the person's behavior. And a really good example of that is to think of a person who is late for work often. Okay. So without knowing anything about that person.
Who has a podcast called the Oddball
Show. Okay.
Just kidding. I'm very timely, very punctual.
Okay. We don't have to be. Because I'm often not. I often struggle, you know, in the mornings with panic. And so it's really difficult. I can do it more and more, and I'm getting better at it, but hitting that target deadline for beginning work. So I have accommodations to have a flexible work schedule. Absolutely. But so if you take somebody who is late for work and you don't know anything about them, and say your supervisor has no curiosity whatsoever to learn, no incentive to learn anything about them, you're very bureaucratic, and you just say that person just doesn't care, doesn't give a damn about their work. They don't care about building teamness. They don't care about all sorts of things. And that being late is reflective that they really don't like their work. They really don't like their job. So I'm going to bypass that person for promotions. I might treat them pretty badly because I think they're kind of stinky. So that's one interpretation. That's an ahistorical interpretation of that person's behavior. If you go to the other side and you become deeply curious about that person. For me, you would learn that I have a profound history of violence, 18 years of violence. That was like broken bones was kind of a weekly or monthly experience for me. I lived in absolute terror. There was sexual assault that lasted for about 10 years. And so when I leave my apartment in the mornings, I'm leaving my safe space. I'm leaving my sanctuary. And suddenly all that trauma that hasn't been resolved yet flares up. And all I experience is terror. And that's a panic attack. That happens almost daily for me. And again, it's, you know, it gets better and better and better over time. And I'm much better than I was, or I have much smaller panic attacks than I did 5 years ago. And if that supervisor then understands that, they're going to be willing to work with me because they see me as a human being. They see how hard I am working to contribute to my organization. And they appreciate the fact that despite what I've been through, I'm still showing up. So that's the difference between not being trauma informed and being trauma informed. And you can take that example and apply it to all sorts of behaviors. Like you were talking about the person who collects a lot of stuff. What's the comfort in that? What's the need for it? It could be a million different things. But if you get to know the person, you'll find out, and you won't call them hoarders, and you won't judge them as hoarders.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the best ways of coming at any relationship, is to be generally curious about the person that you're speaking with.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Look, yes. Not look just at the surface, but look beyond the surface.
Right. And, and I keep remembering, keep wanting to say this. So there's another thing that peer specialists bring to the table. So we're trained to be curious. That's in our training. I'm one of the lead trainers for the Certified Peer Specialist training in the state. We do that through the Transformation Center. We have this amazing training that the peer specialists go through in the state. And we're always teaching to be curious, find out about the person, learn about the person. It's all about that. And when we bring that kind of training into the organizations, that's something that we have to share and to teach the organization, so they can learn from us. They can learn this different way of relating to people and supporting people. And there are all sorts of things in our training that we bring that the organization then can benefit from, because they can learn from it. They can learn from our example. They'll see us being ways that they haven't seen people be before.
If you're just turning in, this is the Oddball Show, and we're speaking with Thomas Brown, the Massachusetts Eastern Peer Network, and a peer specialist for the Eastern Mass Peer Network. Prof, what's going on?
Chilling, man. I'm right here. This is probably the least I've ever spoken on a podcast, and I love it, man. You guys are just going. I love everything about it. I think you're informing a lot of our listeners on some important stuff. Right. So there's absolutely no reason for me to butt in until the proper time comes. I had a question. I did want to ask about a lot of what you're talking about. Seems like it's at the heart of the safety net outreach program. Is that different, or is that just kind of encompassing the work that you're doing?
So Safety Net Outreach is a team that I work on in my organization, which is Bay Cove Human Services.
And that seems specifically for folks that want to be outside of any kind of system.
So yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. So there are people using the system in all sorts of different ways. So some people like to are very comfortable living more independently, and that's something. I mean, for me, that's kind of the vision I have for using mental health services, is that people use them intensively for a period of time, but then they go on. They gain the skill. They gain whatever it is they need to get from the system, connecting to other humans, rehumanizing, feeling like a human again, or for the first time. They get all of that during a shorter period of time from the organizations, and then they go on to live independently. And there are programs across the state that kind of work with people at that level of transition. So I think, for Safety Net Outreach, that was what the team was. That was the vision for the team. And
there's different parts of there's different programs within that peer specialists are part of. Some people are part of an emergency services team. Right. I'm part of it's called a CBFS team. It's CBFS, flexible support program, where because I guess it's consumer-based flexible support program. I guess that's what you.
It's community-based.
Community-based flexible support program, where I work with a team of people to work who are picked by the person that we support to work with them. Specifically, an employment specialist or someone or a resource specialist, and so there's different types of programs and that peer specialists are part of. So it's always it's interesting that you could find a peer specialist in an emergency room, or you could find a peer specialist basically in any kind of aspect of health and human services, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Excellent.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for answering that question.
Yeah.
This does seem like a pretty good spot, as we get going in a good oddball show. Time flies by, so it seems like a pretty good spot to break into the middle, do a little what's going on with our various websites break, and then come back and talk a little bit more. Thomas started talking about his own personal history, so I'd like to talk a little bit about how you and Jason met, and a little bit about
Absolutely.
how your individual histories influence your very important work. And then whatever else we want to talk about. I know we have not yet spoken about what is going into the new ACCS model, so we'll definitely get into that in the second half. But Jason, you want to kick us off with what's going on at Oddball Magazine?
Sure. Normally we have this really cool sound effect, Prof, that I can't really go without, but I'm going to have to try. Usually breaking news is like... Yeah.
Breaking news.
Breaking news. So it's much more effective with the but
it really has a much bigger impact.
I will just definitely have to go without it. But anyway, so as you know, if you've been listening to the Oddball Show, or if you're under a rock and you don't know, we are part of Oddball Magazine and JP Lime, our two vehicles for self-expression, I guess you would say. Oddball Magazine is oddballmagazine.com, and we're poetry, art, and entertainment for the masses, led by myself and my associate editor, Chad Parento, who, if you have been listening to the Oddball Show, has been a frequent voice on the Oddball Show. We have a lot going on today at Oddball Magazine, as usual. We have from the Epic Autism Review, which is Fleming Bobrin's column. The Epic Autistic Review is Fleming's column that he speaks about any kind of an opinion column. This one is about the Patriots. It's called Haterade, which is very fitting for people who absolutely hate the Patriots, and I can't understand it because they're my favorite team besides the Boston Celtics. But when you're so good, people, what's the term, Prof? Hate is gonna hate, right?
That's right. That's all they're gonna do.
Right, they're gonna hate, and they'll hate us in 2 weeks. Anyway, we also have the Jagged Thought that I wrote this, which is consequently about the Super Bowl. Very quick. You could really fit it in a tweet, and actually, that's one of the lines in the poem. And that was today. We also had artwork by Bill Wallach. He's been a contributor of ours for the last year, and he paired with a poem by a poet named Sunil Sharma, and it's getting a good response on the website. So we're really happy to have Sunil on the website. Also, we have our weekly comic strip by Bill Harvey from The Odds, Making the Serious Delirious. He's been lately talking about what goes behind the odds, what is making up, what is his thought process in making up his comic strips, which is really great. Once again, if you just joined us, we have Wise Words with Bruce Wise every Friday. He's a fantastic poet. We were lucky that he would always submit to our submission manager, which you are welcome to if you're listening and you want to submit to Oddball Magazine. You can just follow our submission guidelines or send me an email. He would always submit these great poems, and I would be like, Bruce, I published you nonstop. Why don't you just become a columnist for us? And he not only gives us one poem, he gives us like 6 or 7 poems in this little column that is literally a newspaper. Which, if you go to and see his banner, it's a newspaper column, because Bruce has a very interesting take on political events, history. He's probably Prof, have you ever read Bruce Wise? He's probably
Of course I have. We've published some of his content for you.
Dude, he's the most interesting person on I love his column every Friday. I mean, I'm in awe by how good this guy is, and the fact that he wants to be on part of our website is really great. So shout out to Bruce Wise. And finally, we had the lovely Liza Zayas and the Underground Garden. and she's always been a great poet and promoter for the website, and a wonderful person, and
a friend of the Oddball Show.
And she's been on the Oddball Show just about a couple times. She's a great person, and shout out to her. And also Janet Cormier and Bamboozled No More from she's a Somerville artist and poet, as well as James Van Looy, who's also a Cambridge poet and a activist who's been doing a lot of good work with us for the last couple of years now. I think that's, and there was last week there was got to give a shout out to Dr. Regina Valuzzi, who's been with us since day one, and her she has paired her wonderful work with a poem by Allende Bonifacio, as well as there was a poem by Holly Day and photography by Luis Lazaro Tayarina. So that's what's been going on in the last week at Oddball Magazine.
Is that it?
Yeah, right. You can check us out every day on Oddball Magazine. You can find us at www.oddballmagazine.com, and we're poetry, art, and entertainment for the masses.
Definitely go check it out. Boston has a great and live poetry scene that Chad Parento is a very big part of.
Oh my God,
and Oddball Magazine connects with a great many of the people within that scene. So definitely come check them out for the livest poetry magazine on the Eastern Seaboard. Over at what's my thing called? JP Lime. Yeah, we are your world with the Crunchy Hip Hop Center at jplimeproductions.com. That is JPLIME. We are a Boston hip hop production company, and our website is JPL Magazine, where we write about hip hop, and we write about TV, and we bring you some of our own content, music, and videos. We're getting ready for a strong 2018. Kind of petered off in the end of 2017, but we're coming back strong. We have this week my article I read a lot about comic book TV shows and other things related to that kind of nerd world. So my article this week is about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. They are it's every Friday night, but they are currently stuck in a weird multiverse clashing timelines. So it's a very interesting season. I think it's their 5th season. I think they're 6-7 episodes in. It's a very interesting season of a show I like a lot. And so my article this week will be about them being stuck in separate timelines. We also, this year, we're going to be working hard on one of our creators and originators is Spaceman. He's got a new thing called 1981 & Co. He is an amateur photographer, and we'll be running a weekly column on 1981 & Co, bringing you some of his paintings and photography, and getting you in touch with how to get more from him. We're also bringing our good friend DJ LSP back for his weekly LSP Throwback Thursday, where he brings you a new hip-hop beat every week for your freestyling and entertainment pleasure. And then this week, I put up our What You Need music video. So that's a music video from JP9 Productions. We're in the spot that usually would be our monthly rap flashback. So right now you can check out our music video for What You Need. You can also find some content from our new duo called Tyler Durden. That's an MC and a bass guitar player who plays
killer band, by the way.
Pretty funky stuff. You can find them in various places in and around Boston, including the Burn open mic they've been known to frequent. And that is pretty much an acoustic open mic, and they show up with an electric bass guitar and a rapper, so that's a lot of fun. But we do a lot of different things at JB9 Productions. Please come and be a part of it. Come and learn about what we're all about. There's a very live hip hop scene going on in Boston, and we like to try to connect you with some of the pieces of that. So come check us out, jplineproductions.com, your world with a crunchy hip hop center.
Absolutely. And if you're listening, and we're sure you are, take your time, go to iTunes and write us a review. Tell us what you think of the Oddball Show. Tell us what you think of the guests that have been on the Oddball Show. Tell us what you think of this podcast with Thomas and what is going on. We love to hear your feedback. So yeah, please write us a review.
Please write us a review. Do it. It's fun.
Do it. Do it now.
Seriously, do it.
Just do it.
So this is the Oddball Show. We're here tonight with Thomas Brown. You can find actually the Oddball Show while we're on that topic on iTunes, on Stitcher. You can find it live on our YouTube channel, on the JP9 Productions YouTube channel. You can also find it at jp9productions.com and Oddball Magazine, all at the exact same time through the power of the internet. So
Power of interweb.
Thanks for tuning in, and tell your friends. Write a review.
Tell your friends and write a review, because we love to do this. We do it because we feel like we have a lot of there's a lot of interesting people, with a lot of interesting stories, and we like to bring you an interesting story. And right now we have an interesting story with Thomas. So welcome back, Thomas.
Hey.
We were talking earlier about trauma-informed care, and I know that when I saw you last, we saw you at the MassPro conference,
right?
And you told us you told us a little about your recovery story, and if you want to go into that, we'd love to hear a little bit about it, about your journey.
Sure, absolutely. I'll just give you an overview. So I was born into a family of violence, and for 18 years, my first 18 years of life, every single day it was violent. If it wasn't physical, it was emotional and verbal. As I was saying before, there was 10 years of sexual assault in there too, which occurred 2 or 3 times a week over a 10-year period. I often try to help people understand the magnitude of that, and children or adults who went through that as children who are going through that. Imagine being raped one time as an adult. We know that is going to change the trajectory of a person's life. But imagine children going through that, throughout childhood, time after time after time. We really have to have compassion for people who survive that kind of trauma. It's just the most heroic thing in the world. To survive that and then try to create a life worth living. Absolutely. And it is possible, and I'm the evidence for that. My life is very well worth living now. So I lived in terror just for almost 2 decades. I got a scholarship to the Boston Conservatory, came out to study music, and then I started having symptoms. When people are surviving violence, they're literally surviving, especially when it's happening on a daily basis. And there's not time.
Oh, sorry, Thomas, it looks like we're having a little bit of a problem with your mic. Let's fix that and have you run back the last thing you said. I don't want anybody to miss anything about your story. Get you there, Thomas?
Am I there?
Thomas, you just have to go back.
All right, well, while we try to correct that mistake, and I'm sure we'll find out by Thomas jumping right back into the conversation here. We are talking with Thomas Brown, peer specialist for the Bay Cove Human Services. Jason, you want to talk a little bit about
my recovery story,
how you two met?
Sure.
And what In Our Own Voices means?
Sure, yeah. So I met Thomas at a program called In Our Own Voice. It's a program that I met. It's part of NAMI, which is the National Alliance of Mental Illness. And basically, before that, we were with the In Our Own Voice program. Prof, can you hear me? Okay, looks like it's my floor right now. So anyway, a little bit about my recovery story and how I met Thomas. So Thomas and I met at a In Our Own Voice workshop. Before the In Our Own Voice program, I had no idea that peer support even existed. I had no idea that there was anyone else out there who was dealing with a mental health condition like I was. I mean, the way I dealt with it was through Oddball magazine, writing poetry and writing with headphones on the train because I was so anxious all the time. And I found out that there was this program called In Our Own Voice, and when with the program In Our Own Voice, I met Thomas, and through In Our Own Voice, we go and we speak with many. We have the opportunity to speak with with hospitals, with students, with police officers, with nurses and faculty, with mental health services, with hospitals, with with people who would generally not know anything about what it's like to live in recovery with a mental health condition. And this is a great program that In Our Own Voice is. And a shout out to Eliza Williamson, who I first met at the NAMI program, and I'd love to have her on the show because I think, it's a great program. So that was, when me and Thomas first met, and we kind of went on our separate paths. But the thing is, we both have our recovery stories. And I think when I first became a peer specialist, one of the things that you do, you learn is to tell your recovery story, and learn to know when you should tell it and when it's very going to be very effective. So that's kind of the basis of being I don't know, when you're I guess when you're being you're being a little bit vulnerable. I think people tend to listen. It can really be helpful in situations like when someone is, when you can relate with someone, or when you are in like a staff meeting or something, and you can relate to and kind of show the worldview of the people that we support. I think that's important. So so I don't know what actually happened with the audio. I'm still trying to figure it out. It says that we are going, but apparently I lost both Prof and Thomas. So I can hear Thomas.
Oh, good. Okay. So
Thomas, can you turn your mic up a little bit?
Sure.
A little bit more. Oh, Thomas, thank you. That is an example of peer support. Oh, boy, that was rough. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, cool. So you were talking an example of peer support is when you have to go on the mic because your mic drops and you have to fill the time. That's kind of an example of peer support, and that's kind of what we just did there.
Very nice work. I could hear you the whole time. And really huge shout out to Eliza Williamson.
Oh, she's great, isn't she? Oh my God.
Yeah. And she's doing such a fantastic job in our state, in our region, and supporting people to get out there and to share their experiences and lower levels of stigma and judgment and oppression in the state for people living with mental health challenges. She's so passionate. She's so dynamic. I just have the greatest respect for her.
Thomas, have you done a lot of In Our Own Voice presentations since we last spoke?
So no, I haven't. Unfortunately, I've done one or two, and they were pretty powerful. But one thing that I've expressed a huge interest in is working with the police departments, and I'll start doing that next week.
Well, you're a braver man than I, because although I have no real reason to fear the police, I fear, they can be so intimidating. But the thing is, that's necessary because, the NAMI program, In Our Own Voice, has changed and shaped people's perceptions of people with mental health challenges. And one of the things that I know from going to it was it was the State Without Stigma or the Moving Beyond Stigma presentation that was earlier in April. That was in. Did you go to that? It was.
Yeah, I did.
Did you?
No, I did not.
Okay, I'll tell you a little about it. They were talking with. It was kind of more about the opioid epidemic, which I think is the dual diagnosis is a part of mental health, right?
Absolutely.
And they were talking about how people, that there's like a whole unit that people or a whole system or kind of a softer way of dealing with people who are also presenting with mental health challenges at the time. And I think that's good because sometimes you don't know what you're going to get as a police officer. You know what I mean?
Oh, right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So one thing I intend to work, I think something I have a huge passion about is working in prisons and working with the police departments to help understand trauma and how trauma often plays a role in acting out in violent ways. There's, we are in our culture, we tend to have a binary understanding of these experiences. They're good or they're bad. The person's good or they're bad. And we often don't go in and contextualize that. And, part of that, I'm thinking there was another school shooting today in Kentucky.
What, really?
Oh, yeah. No, yeah.
Oh, my God. I didn't know that.
Yeah. It's definitely an epidemic. And so understanding why people feel like they need to act out with acts of violence and hopefully to prevent it. But it's important. I think one thing for me, growing up in so much violence and somebody who's had to process a ton of rage out of my system, I have a really deep understanding of violence and some of the motives behind it. And I really am working to help people bring that understanding to people working in prisons, people working in the police departments.
Absolutely. And I think that kind of goes with that trauma-informed
it is.
idea.
It absolutely is.
If you can teach that trauma-informed care, in this case, I would say trauma-informed care, trauma-informed support to police officers, knowing that the people that are kind of because when you are a police officer, you're seeing someone at their worst point, and
absolutely, and it's a rough gig. I mean,
you're
there. You've got to look out for the safety of others. You've got to look out for the safety of yourself, and you've got to look out for the safety of the person. There's so much happening in such a short amount of time. We're talking split seconds, and they've got to make these decisions. And it's just an incredible challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. So you were telling us a little bit about In Our Own Voice, and In Our Own Voice has a little bit of a fun part where it says so there's parts of In Our Own Voice that talk about who you are besides, not Thomas, the person who has, gone through some trauma, but how about the person who also, trained as a musician or something like that? Can you?
Yeah.
So it talks about the fun parts of, or the interesting parts about you, and lets people know that it's not Jason, who has, bipolar disorder or whatever.
Yeah.
In fact, you don't lead with that. You say you're a Celtics man or a Simpsons guy or Johnny Cash lover or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
So why don't you talk about a little bit, what's something that's not about your what are some things,
So the opposite of my trauma was music. I started at a really young age, just being completely enthralled with music, and I started playing trumpet, and that became the love of my life. And I would just find myself playing for hours and hours every single day. And I became really good, was a bit of a prodigy, had a lot of opportunities when I was in middle school, high school, to get outside of my family, to get outside of my home, and be in different kinds of environments. And I often think that that's one of the things that really helped me survive what I survived, was having music. And it's just absolutely amazing for me. I still have that passion. I went on actually to go to conservatory and played for years after that. I still have that passion. And I don't have the time for it though.
Yeah, of course. Well, you're a very busy man.
Yeah.
You do a lot, and you do a lot good for the community. And I know we didn't really talk about it, but do you want to talk about the Eastern Mass Peer Network in case people want to get involved with it?
Sure, absolutely. So we formed the organizing members of the Eastern Mass Peer Network, formed really in response to the RFI, response for information the DMH sent out to human services agencies, looking at what they wanted to see in a new model of mental health care provision services. And so something that had not happened in the creation of CPFS is that there wasn't a meaningful presence and voice of the peer support workforce. And so what we decided is that we would really form an organization that would get a lot of members, get a lot of people join. I mean, we went around just drumming up membership over a really short period of time, which was about 2 to 3 weeks, and got people really interested. It got members interested, and people joined. And we started. We combined with the Western Mass recovery learning community, and we got people across the state, peer workers across the state, to come together and say what they wanted to see in the new model. And sure enough, we got it. And that was 3 times the number of peer support workers on teams in the agencies. And protected roles also. We were often, I don't want to say misused, but kind of we were co-opted to do work other than peer support work, which left us very little time to actually do peer support and do the thing that we had trained for, that we'd become professionals for, and to do the thing that really helped. And so we asked for that. We sent, those are some of the comments we sent in for the RFI, and we got that. We have a mandate to protect the peer support roles in our agency, so the peer supporters do peer support. And now Eastern Mass Peer Network, what we're doing is that we're dedicated to the professional development of peer support workers. So we have trainings. We have a weekly peer support for peer support workers call that people can come with issues related to the work or problems they're having or successes and talk about that. And we have we try to have a couple of community gatherings where we just have fun. And then we also have a speaker series where people can learn from people who've been in the field for a while.
So, okay, so the Eastern Mass Peer Network is also, so anyone in the Massachusetts area, if you are a peer support specialist or want to know a little bit more about peer support, where can you find a little bit more information about the Eastern Massachusetts Peer Network?
Okay, so you can email us at EMPN, I'm sorry, 2017 EMPN @gmail.com, and you can go to our website and find information about our weekly peer support phone call, and you can become a member there, and that's at EMPNET at goodness, what is it? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting. I think it's just EMPnetwork.org. Sorry. EMPnetwork.org. Right, that's correct. And go down the bottom of the page to become a member.
Okay, well, great, Thomas. We're running down to the end of the hour, as we usually do here at the Oddball Show when we're having a great discussion.
Okay.
Right now, we're going to go into a little something that we do with Prof. It's called the List of 10, and he got it kind of from James Lipton, who got it from some guy, who got it from some guy, who got it from some guy. And Prof really enjoys doing this, but Prof has graced me with this this moment to do the List of 10 with you, Thomas, because he has dropped out of the audio for some reason. And that's just how it goes with technology.
Right.
Technology. Anyway, so I'm going to go on with this List of 10, Thomas. Are you ready? And usually Prof does a much better job at this, but I'm going to try, okay? The List of 10. And then he'll say the List of 10, and then I'll go, the List of 10. And he goes, are you ready to go? And then he does it. So, okay. Number 1. I'll try and do it like Prof. So if you've been listening to before, you'll know how Prof does it.
Okay.
Number 1. I can't do it like Prof. Here we go. Number 1. What time and place would you like to be if not here and now? I'll read it over again. So I'll read it in my voice. But that's how Prof reads it because he's got a good radio voice. Thomas, what time and place would you like to be if not here and now?
Like historically? Where would I
like? Yeah, like historically.
Oh, I would like to be in 2000 and 60.
Okay.
Because I would like to see where peer support is.
Wow, that's a great answer.
Yeah,
Because we all would like to see what's going to happen in 2060.
absolutely.
And I think there should be great gains in the peer work by 2018,
Absolutely.
2019, 2020. So by 2060, maybe a peer will be in the White House. Who knows?
Yeah. Absolutely.
All right, number 2. What is the greatest advice you've ever received?
Accept everybody.
Accept everybody. That's wonderful. That's wonderful advice. Because it is most important to accept everybody. That's good.
Yeah. It's hard work.
Okay. It definitely is hard work.
Yeah.
Number 3. What would your superpower be?
My superpower?
Yeah.
Huh. You know what? I kind of have it. And because I've worked so much hard, I've done so much research academically, and I've worked so hard on myself around trauma, that I have a knack for understanding people's trauma histories without a whole lot of information. And often, even sometimes from the way a person walks, seeing certain kinds of trauma that have affected them, like if it's really early or birth.
So would you say your superpower is compassion?
Well, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. This one, let's see if you, number 4, Biggie or Tupac? Notorious B.I.G. or Tupac Shakur?
Tupac Shakur.
Oh, absolutely. As far as these two rappers go, Tupac is a genuine poet, and I've always been near and dear to his story. Definitely. Biggie had bars though. He really could rhyme. He really could rhyme. Okay, number 5. Who is your favorite person?
Alive or dead?
Yeah.
Either. Okay. My favorite person?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a really hard one. Oh, there's so many people.
Oh, well, that's great.
Huh. Wait, give me a second on this one.
Sure.
I would say my favorite person, there are so many people who come to mind. There are people living right now in the recovery movement. I think of Sarah Davidow out in Western Mass Recovery Learning Center, and everything that she's done for the community, which is really extraordinary. So I'm going to stick with that one.
So, Sarah, if you're listening, Thomas thinks you're his favorite person. So, shout out to Sarah Davidow. Okay, this one is a great question for you. Number 6, what is your quest?
My quest is I am the Johnny Appleseed of trauma education.
Oh.
I am trying, by the time I die, I want this to be a trauma-informed world.
Man, Thomas, you are so inspiring. Okay, Thomas, here we go. Fill in the blank. All you need is
love.
Love. Okay, good. That is a good one. Yeah. So says Paul. So says Thomas. Okay, number 8. Rock, paper, or scissors?
Scissors.
Scissors. Do you know why?
No, I just used scissors to open some tofu today, and nothing else works. So
for me, it's paper because I'm a writer, but scissors is pretty effective when you're trying to get through something. So,
absolutely.
And I think that's what you're trying to do is trying to get through stuff. So,
nice.
As in, like, cut down the stigma of mental health, and I love it. So
I'll
I think
definitely go with that.
Okay,
awesome.
Good. Number 9, Thomas. What do you want to be when you grow up?
Huh. Oh boy. Wow. Wow. What do I want to be when I grow up? A writer.
A writer. Okay. Yeah. Good. And finally, Thomas, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear St. Peter say when you reach the pearly gates?
Good job.
Absolutely. And that was the list of 10. The list
awesome.
of 10. Awesome. So if you've been with us this long, you've been listening to Thomas, Prof, and I at the Oddball Show. We are your source for the most interesting people we can find, who have interesting stories. I think that's the theme of this show. If you've listened from the beginning, we've had poets, artists, writers, musicians, people who are making great strides in the mental health field, and anyone else. There's someone who works on Boston movies, Punji. Shout out to Punji. We love having him. We've had our political guys on there. We've had comedians. We've had a lot of people on the show because everyone has an interesting story. And we want to thank you, Thomas, for being on the show today.
Oh, it was a great pleasure. You guys are
absolutely.
doing really great work. I really appreciate it. Thank you for what you're doing for our community and our world. And I love your magazine. People should go to it.
Oh, thank you, Thomas. Have you read the magazine in the past?
Oh, well, actually, only in the past 2 months. But I'm in love with it.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Thomas, we hope to have you back on the program more.
Right. I'd love to come back.
And we want to thank you for being on the show. So,
my pleasure.
Be on the show whenever you want. Thank you, Thomas. You're doing great work for peer support, and you're a wonderful person. You have a wonderful story. And thank you so much for being on the show.
Okay. Great pleasure.
So that was Thomas Brown, and we are the Oddball Show. Find us on iTunes, Stitcher, and on both our Oddball magazine and JP Line Productions. Usually I I close out with my Jagged Thought, and I guess I will do the same today. So Thomas, once again, thank you for being on the show.
You bet.
It's been a real pleasure having you, and hopefully we'll have you on real soon. So this is our last the last minute of the show. It's called the Jagged Thought of the it's my Jagged Thought. It's my weekly Jagged Thought from Oddball magazine, and I'm gonna read it for you right now. So here we go. The Jagged Thought is Jagged Thought 209, and it's called Back. Very short. Here we go. Could fit it in a tweet. Okay. This is to all you Patriots fans out there. Well, what do you know? Here we go. Another ride to the Super Bowl with the GOAT in the driver's seat. We're on to Minnesota. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Short and sweet. Fit this poem in a tweet. Brady, Belichick, rolling Amendola, heading back to the Super Bowl. Yeah, sorry, Eagles. Hate to tell you, you don't have a chance in hell. Yeah, not with the GOAT, Gronk, and Bill Belly. Nope, it's all over, kid. Super Bowl, get ready. And that was Jagged Thought 209 Back. And this has been the Oddball Show. So once again, thanks for being on the program, Thomas. We really appreciate it. And
great pleasure.
We'll have you on real soon. So to everybody out there, be good. We'll see you real soon. And this has been the Oddball Show.
This is the Oddball Show, a podcasting collaboration with JP Line Productions